Hello, welcome back to episode 8 of Surface Explore Record, where I'm teaching you a three-step methodology of using AI to build an application. Those three steps are surface, that is surface decisions using AI, explore options for each decision, and then record the decisions to be able to use those to build your application instead of letting the AI build an application based on its own decisions silently. So far, we've made it through the idea phase where we've made the business and product requirements. We went through the design phase where we picked what we wanted our app to look like. We went through the architecture phase where we looked at the technical decisions. And then last episode, we looked at the planning phase, which is where we created our implementation plan that we're going to use this episode starting, where we're going to actually build our application or begin building our application. This will be several episodes. And I'm going to go through that same three-step methodology. Remember, I'm using this methodology to build a task management app. It's a very simple app, but the same methodology works no matter what kind of app you're using. So let's run over to VS Code and open up Claude Code, and let's see how we're going to begin building our application. Okay, here we are in VS Code. I have Claude Code running in a terminal, and I have my implementation plan pulled up in VS Code. Now, one thing I want to point out is that in my implementation plan, I already have listed all of the reference documents that the AI will need. So as it goes through the implementation, for instance, if I go down to the beginning, part A, you're going to see these references. ADR 026, that is a specific architectural decision record. TDD4, that is a specific section in my technical design document. And the AI is going to know where to find those because they're listed here in my reference documents. So we're going to use this implementation plan to begin building my TaskFlow application. So let's start. And I apologize, I did not have this ready at the beginning. So let me pull up my first prompt and I'll show you how I'm going to start building my application. All right, here's my first prompt. I'm just telling Claude that I'm finally ready to begin building TaskFlow. Now, in reality, I've been building TaskFlow for the last seven episodes. But what I've been doing is I've been laying the groundwork, laying the framework, creating some standards that I want the AI to use as it builds my application. Now, I could start here, and I could have just said, hey, build an application that's a task manager and it does this. And I let the AI run, and it would create an application, and that might be a pretty good application. But would it have what I want? I don't know, and you don't know. Unless I make the decisions and record those and give those to the AI, I don't know what it's creating. So let's start again. We're going to tell it to start building our task flow, following the implementation plan. I tell it where it is, and I say that I want it to complete Part A, Phase 0. This is actually just setting up the structure in my repo and in my project. And then when it's done, when it's complete, update the implementation status file. So I'm going to kick off Claude Code. While it's running and it's starting to do the implementation plan part A, I'll wait a few minutes and come back and we'll take a look at what's happened. Okay, Claude is done. Welcome back. And we can see that Claude has finished phase 0. It says phase 0 is complete. It tells us what it did. And now, though, I want to double check. So let's go over to my implementation status file. I can go to phase 0, and you can see that it's put a check mark on everything that it's completed. I have a record now of everything that's been completed so far. I can stop at this point, come back later, and pick it up, and I'll know exactly where I'm supposed to be. But that's not all that the documentation is good for. We built all this information not just to have a blueprint to give to Claude to build, but also something to compare it to. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to tell Claude to review the work that it just did. Now, in reality, if I was going to build a real production app, this would be a much more complicated, much more complex prompt. I would tell it exactly what I want it to check. In this case, I'm just telling it to review the work that it already did in Part A, Phase 0, compare it to the ADRs, TDDs, and PRD, that is the architecture decision record, the technical decision document, and then the technical design document and the product requirements document, and make sure that there are no discrepancies or inconsistencies. So again, Claude has finished the work. It supposedly followed the pattern that I gave it, but now we're just going to have it double check. Go in and make sure that it's doing that. So while Claude does this review, then we're going to wait, and I'll come back in a few minutes when it's done. Okay, we're back. So Claude Code reviewed the work that it just did against my documentation, and noticed it found several different inconsistencies and things that need to be fixed. This is just on the scaffolding. This is not even on the coding yet. So the next thing we want to do is tell Claude to fix these things. We could do it one by one, or we could do it all at the same time. But this is very important. If we let things sit as inconsistent and not following our plan, our blueprint, our decisions, then it's just going to grow as we go. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to have Claude fix these, and then I'll come back in just a few minutes. Okay, welcome back. So I've worked with Claude, and as you can see here, I fixed all of the 9 inconsistencies that we found, and we updated the documentation so that there was complete consistency. I'm not going to worry about the still pending for now. That's a hands-on issue. We'll deal with that later. Now let's go to the next part. But let me open up our implementation plan. We just finished the very first phase, which was here, the task, or part A, which was just phase 0, and that's only the foundation, this foundation. So now we have to decide, what do we want to do next? If we go to phase or part B, we see that there are several phases in part B. And there are different ways that we could do this. We can even come to our AI at this point and say, hey, what are the options to complete part B? But what I want to do instead is I want to take it, for now, just one part at a time. I'm just going to do just this phase B1, just so that we can start seeing how you can step through it. You can make your work as small as you want or as big as you want, depending on the type of work that you're doing. And just realize that the more work that you allow the AI to do on its own without stopping and reviewing, then the more likelihood there is later that your context is going to fill up, or that your output will need to be reviewed and modified. So right now, I'm just going to tell it, only do part B, phase B1. And we're going to kick off Claude again. We're going to let it look at the implementation plan, start going through B1, and I'll come back when it's done, and we'll see what's happened. Okay, so Claude has finished phase B1. Let's take a look at our implementation status. If I pull that up here, and now we can see all of B1 is checked that it's done. Claude thinks that it's finished everything. It thinks that it's followed the foundations, the documents that I've given it, but we don't want to take Claude's word for it. So again, we're going to have a review and compare what was just created with our documentation. So again, I'm going to say, compare what was just created in phase B1 to the applicable ADRs, TDDs, PRDs, and see if you can find any discrepancies or inconsistencies. This step is very important because, again, we don't want to have errors showing up now, especially early in the project, the foundational part of the project, that are going to cause us headaches later on. So we find these now. But this is a very important step all along the way. So let's take another break, and we'll see what Claude comes up with. Okay, we're back. Once again, Claude found 9 inconsistencies where the code that it created did not match the blueprint that I gave it, the standard that I gave it. So again, I'm just going to have it fix these errors. I'll go through them one by one. I'll ask for options, and I'll fix them the way they should be fixed, and I'll make sure that the documentation is consistent, and then I'll come back when I'm done. Okay, we're back. Claude has finished reconciling all of the differences that we found when finishing B1. But I know sometimes when people are vibe coding or using AI to build, they don't like to go step by step. So for the next part, I'm going to have it just finish the rest of part B. It's already done B1, but now do the rest of part B. And I'm going to kick off Claude. I'm not going to make you sit here and wait for this. This will take a little bit longer. But after this is finished, I'll go through the same review process. I'll tell it to review all of part B that it just finished. I'll go through and do any fixes of inconsistencies that it finds, and then I'll be ready to move on to part C. Excuse me. So I'm going to stop the video at this point. This will be the end of episode 8. We'll return for part C in the next episode, and we'll move through it pretty quickly, and you'll see how the app begins to take shape. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this. I know a lot of people think the build is the most exciting part. I wanted to take this a little bit slower so you can see how we're using the documentation that we've created in the previous episodes in the previous phases of the SDLC to build our application. Hope to see you next time.